The Crystal Pavilion ballroom glittered, a galaxy of diamonds suspended over the cream of New York City's elite. But for Elara Vance it was a gilded cage, the air thick with perfume and poison. Tonight was supposed to be the pinnacle of her life. Her engagement party to Richard Sterling, heir to the Sterling real estate fortune. Instead, it was her execution. And to my beautiful fiancé, Elara, Richard Say, smooth as aged whiskey, boomed from the stage. He raised his champagne flute, his Armani suit impeccable, his smile a perfectly calibrated weapon. A woman whose creativity knows no bounds. A ripple of snickers went through the crowd. Elara stood frozen beside him, the blush-pink couture gown feeling like a shroud. Her design, her sketch, her dream, except the name on the official press release for the gown, hailed as the fashion event of the season, wasn't hers. It was Isabella Vance's, her stepsister. Isabella stood beside their father, Marcus Vance, looking ethereal in a pale blue dress, her eyes brimming with faux humility. "I can't take all the credit," she'd demurely told Vogue earlier. "I was just inspired. Inspired." Elara thought, her hands clenching at her sides. "You stole my sketchbook, my life's work, and called it inspiration." Richard's arm snaked around her waist, his fingers digging into her side in a gesture that looked like affection but felt like a warning. "But love, like art, is full of surprises," he continued, his gaze sweeping over the audience. "And I'm afraid we've discovered a rather unpleasant surprise about Elara's character." The room hushed. A massive screen behind the stage, which had been cycling through photos of the happy couple, flickered to life. It showed grainy security footage. Elara in the Vance family design studio, handing a portfolio to a man in shadows. Then, a bank statement showing a $500,000 deposit into her personal account. The recipient, a shell corporation linked to the Vance family's biggest rival. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Onlookers stared, their expressions shifting from envy to disgust. "Corporate espionage," Richard said, his voice dripping with theatrical sorrow. "She sold our family's upcoming collection designs to our competitors." "No," Elara's voice was a ragged whisper. "That's not true. I would never." She turned to her father, her last hope. Marcus Vance, a man whose approval she had craved her entire life, wouldn't meet her eyes. His face was a mask of cold disappointment. "I can't believe you would do this to your own family, Elara, to Isabella, after everything we've given you." "Father, please. Isabella is the one who..." "Enough." Marcus's voice cracked like a whip. "You have disgraced the Vance name. As of this moment, you are no longer my daughter. You are disowned. Security will see you out." Isabella rushed to their father's side, clinging to his arm. "Oh, Daddy," she sobbed, burying her face in his shoulder. "I can't believe she'd betray us like this. After I tried so hard to be a good sister, the betrayal was so perfect, so complete, it was almost a work of art." They had stripped her of her work, her reputation, her and her family, all in one fell swoop. The onlookers, who had adored her moments before, now looked at her like she was vermin. Two burly security guards appeared, grabbing her by the arms. Humiliation washed over her, hot and suffocating. Richard leaned in close, his breaths smelling of champagne and deceit. "This is what happens to thieves, Elara. You should have known your place." As they dragged her towards the service exit, past a gauntlet of shocked and judgmental stares, her gaze fell upon a man sitting alone at a corner table. He hadn't been there before. He was impeccably dressed in a custom-tailored black suit, his presence an island of stillness in the churning sea of drama. His face was sharp, sculpted, with eyes as dark and deep as a midnight abyss. He met her gaze, and in his eyes she saw not pity or disgust, but a flicker of something else. Recognition, interest. It was Damien Blackwood, the phantom CEO of the Blackwood conglomerate. A man so powerful and reclusive he was more myth than reality. He controlled half the city but was rarely seen. What was he doing here? As the guards shoved her through the heavy doors and into the cold, rain-slicked alley, the sounds of the party muffled behind her. The blush-pink gown was already stained with grime. She was homeless, penniless, and utterly alone. They thought they had broken her. They had taken Elara Vance and thrown her in the trash. Her phone, the one thing they hadn't taken, buzzed in her small clutch. It was a number she hadn't called in 5 years. She answered, her voice trembling, but with an undercurrent of steel she didn't know she possessed. "It's me," she said. A calm, professional voice replied on the other end. "Miss, is the New York experiment concluded?" Elara took a deep, shuddering breath, the icy rain plastering her hair to her face. She looked back at the glowing windows of the Crystal Pavilion, a world that had just violently ejected her. "The experiment is over," she said, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous murmur. "Activate everything. It's time for Aura to come home." The first 24 hours were a blur of calculated survival. Elara didn't weep. She didn't rage. The shock had cauterized her emotions, leaving behind a cold, clear purpose. Her first call had been to her old life. Her second was to a discreet 24-hour luxury service, a number reserved for the world's true elite. By dawn, the ruined couture gown was sealed in an evidence bag. Elara was showered, dressed in a simple but elegant black sheath dress, and sitting in a penthouse suite at the Mandarin Oriental, overlooking Central Park. The suite was paid for from an account the Vances knew nothing about, an account belonging to Aura. Aura wasn't just a name. It was a legend in the world of haute couture, a ghost designer who released only one collection a year, sold through private auctions to a clientele of billionaires and royalty. No one knew Aura's face or identity. They only knew her work groundbreaking, visionary, and astronomically expensive. For the past 5 years, Elara had lived as Elara Vance, the meek, overshadowed daughter, hoping to win her father's love with her own merit. It had been a fool's errand. That naive girl was gone, left for dead in a back alley. Her assistant, a sharp woman named Chloe, arrived with a tablet and a steaming cup of Earl Grey tea. "The assets are liquid," Chloe reported, her voice crisp. "Your private design studio in Milan is on standby. The legal team is ready. The Aura Spring Collection auction is scheduled for next month. What are your orders, Miss Vance?" Elara took a sip of tea, the warmth a small comfort. First, a subtle market tremor. "I want every textile supplier and artisan workshop that has an exclusive contract with Vance Couture to receive a better offer, an anonymous, significantly better offer, double their current rate. I want them to start having contractual difficulties." Chloe's lips curved into a small, appreciative smile. "Consider it done. It will snarl their production line for the upcoming fashion week." Second, Elara continued, her eyes fixed on the distant Vance Tower. "I need information. Everything on Richard Sterling's latest real estate deal. The Hudson Yards Pinnacle project. Find its weaknesses, and the Vances. Let them enjoy their victory for a few days," Elara said, a glacial calm settling over her. "Pride comes before the fall, and I want them to be looking up when they trip." Meanwhile, the city was abuzz with the scandal. Heiress disowned for corporate treachery, screamed the headlines. Isabella was on every morning show, dabbing at crocodile tears and speaking of her heartbreak over her sister's betrayal. Richard played the part of the jilted noble perfectly. Their victory felt absolute. But 3 days later, the first crack appeared. Marcus Vance slammed his fist on his mahogany desk. "What do you mean? Ritchie and Sons are pulling their contract. They've supplied our silk for 50 years. Isabella, sketching clumsily at her design table, looked up. "Daddy, what's wrong?" "All of our primary suppliers are suddenly reviewing their exclusivity clauses. They've received anonymous buyout offers that are impossible to match. It will delay the entire collection." At the same time, Richard Sterling was facing his own nightmare. A crucial investor in his Hudson Yards project had suddenly pulled out, citing unforeseen market volatility. The project was leveraged to the hilt. Without those funds, the entire structure was on the verge of collapse. Panic began to set in. It felt like a ghost was systematically dismantling their lives. That evening, Elara attended a charity art auction at the Met, not as a disgraced outcast, but as a guest of honor. No one knew who had invited her. She wore a simple, devastatingly elegant black gown of her own designer, Whisper of the Aura style. It clung to her like a second skin, its minimalist lines making every other woman in the room look overdone. Heads turned, whispers followed her. "Is that Elara Vance? What is she doing here? I thought she was ruined. Who would dare invite her? Look at that dress. I've never seen anything like it." She ignored them, her gaze cool and composed as she moved through the gallery. Then she saw him again. Damien Blackwood. He was standing by a Rothko, a glass of whiskey in his hand, watching her. This time, he didn't just watch. He walked towards her. The crowd parted for him as if he were royalty. He stopped in front of her, his presence so intense it seemed to suck the air from her lungs. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice a low baritone that sent a shiver down her spine. "A phoenix, it seems, rising from the ashes already." "Mr. Blackwood," she replied, her voice steady. "I wasn't aware I had burned." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "The entire city believes you did. Yet here you are, looking more radiant than the woman who supposedly stole your thunder." He gestured to her dress. "This is your work, isn't it? It has a certain signature, unmistakable." He knew. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. How could he possibly know? "I don't know what you mean," she said, her guard instantly up. "Don't you?" His dark eyes held hers, and for a moment she felt completely exposed. 5 years ago, a piece was sold at a private auction in Geneva, a single gown called First Snow. It broke all records. It was attributed to a designer known only as Aura. Your dress tonight, it has the same soul. Her heart hammered against her ribs. No one was supposed to know that. You have a keen eye, Mr. Blackwood. I have a keen interest in rare and beautiful things, he said, his gaze lingering on her, and an even keener interest in justice. The Vances and the Sterlings have made a powerful enemy. I'm not sure they realize just how powerful. He leaned closer, his voice dropping so only she could hear. If you need a partner to fan the flames, my resources are at your disposal. Before she could process his offer, a commotion erupted near the entrance. Isabella had arrived, arm in arm with Richard, preening for the cameras. She wore another of Elara's stolen designs, a garish sequined number that she wore with none of the grace it required. Isabella's eyes widened in shock and fury when she saw Elara not just present, but conversing with the Damien Blackwood. She marched towards them, Richard trailing behind her. "Elara, what are you doing here?" Isabella demanded, her voice shrill. "You have some nerve showing your face after what you did." Elara simply raised an eyebrow. "Am I not allowed to appreciate art?" "You're a pariah, a thief," Richard snarled, stepping forward. "Get out before I have security throw you out again." Damien Blackwood took a step, partially shielding Elara. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The temperature in the room dropped by 20 degrees. "She is with me," he said simply. The words, spoken with quiet authority, landed like a thunderclap. Richard and Isabella froze, their faces a comical mask of disbelief. The surrounding guests gasped. Damien Blackwood, the untouchable titan of industry, was publicly aligning himself with the city's most notorious disgrace. With you," Richard stammered. Damien's gaze was utterly dismissive. "You heard me. Now, if you'll excuse us, Miss Vance and I have business to discuss." He offered Elara his arm. As she took it, she gave Richard and Isabella a look of cool, unbothered pity. It was the first strike. A small one, but it had landed perfectly. As Damien led her away, the whispers behind them were no longer of her shame, but of her mysterious, powerful new protector. She had gone from the bottom of the scrap heap to the arm of the most powerful man in New York, and her enemies had no idea how it had happened. The game, she thought, had just begun. The week following the Met auction was a slow-burning fuse. Damian Blackwood's public endorsement of Elara had sent shockwaves through the city's elite. Suddenly, the narrative began to shift. Was Elara Vance truly a villain, or was there more to the story? Invitations, which had vanished overnight, began to trickle back in. Doors that had slammed shut were now tentatively creaking open. Isabella and Richard were apoplectic. Their perfectly crafted story was fraying at the edges. How did she get to him? Isabella shrieked, throwing a design magazine across her new, sprawling office at Vance Couture office that should have been Elara's. Damian Blackwood doesn't even socialize. He's a ghost. Richard, pacing the room like a caged animal, was more concerned with the practicalities. Forget Blackwood for a second. My Hudson Yards deal is bleeding investors, and your father just told me that Vance Couture's entire production line is halted. Their suppliers are all in breach of contract. It's a catastrophe. This was the moment Elara had been waiting for. The annual Fashion Forward Gala was the industry's most prestigious event. A precursor to New York Fashion Week, where designers showcased a single show-stopping piece. Vance Couture, with Isabella as its new star, was meant to be the headline act. Their gown was supposed to be Isabella's grand coronation, but without their fine silks from Italy and their master embroiderers from France, they were crippled. In a desperate move, they outsourced to lesser workshops, trying to replicate one of Elara's most complex designs, a gown meant to look like liquid moonlight. Elara knew they would fail. That design required a specific silk weaving technique she had spent years developing. On the night of the gala, Elara arrived once again on Damian Blackwood's arm. She wore a deceptively simple column dress of crimson silk. It was elegant, powerful, but designed not to be the center of attention. Tonight, the spotlight belonged to Isabella. The Vances and Richard stood by the main stage, accepting congratulations, though their smiles were strained. Finally, the moment arrived. The host's voice boomed through the hall. And now, the moment we've all been waiting for, the breathtaking centerpiece from the new visionary of Vance Couture, Isabella Vance. The curtains parted. A model stood on a pedestal, wearing the liquid moonlight gown. A collective audible gasp went through the audience. But it wasn't a gasp of admiration. It was a gasp of horror. The dress was a disaster. The cheap silk, unable to hold the intricate structure, sagged and puckered in all the wrong places. The embroidery, meant to be delicate starlight, was clumsy and thick. The color was a dull dishwater gray instead of shimmering silver. It didn't look like moonlight. It looked like a dirty puddle. In the front row, a revered fashion critic, Genevieve Dubois of Global Vogue, slowly lowered her opera glasses. Her face a mask of utter contempt. Isabella's face went white. She had seen the dress in the studio, and her sycophantic assistants had assured her it was perfect. But here, under the unforgiving stage lights, it was a monstrosity. The lighting is bad, she stammered to her father, but it was too late. The whispers started, then grew into a roar of mockery. My God, what is that thing, Vance Couture, that looks like something from a fast fashion bargain bin? I've seen better tablecloths. How embarrassing. Richard looked like he was going to be physically ill. Marcus Vance's face was purple with rage and humiliation. This wasn't just a fashion faux pas, it was a public execution of their brand's reputation. As the mortified model was ushered off the stage, the gala's host, trying to salvage the evening, quickly moved on. Up next, we have a surprise last-minute entry, a piece from a private designer known only as Aura. The name hung in the air, electric. Everyone in the fashion world knew of Aura. To see a piece in person was a once-in-a-lifetime event. The curtains parted again. A different model stood on the pedestal. She wore a gown that seemed spun from the night sky itself. It was a masterpiece of black velvet and silk, so dark it seemed to absorb the light. Thousands of tiny hand-set diamonds were scattered across the fabric, glittering like a distant nebula. The cut was revolutionary, a perfect blend of classic elegance and futuristic structure. It was art. It was magic. The room fell into a stunned, reverent silence. Genevieve Dubois slowly raised her opera glasses again, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. Magnifique, she whispered, loud enough for those around her to hear. The host's voice trembled with excitement. Ladies and gentlemen, the piece is titled Event Horizon. From her place in the crowd, Elara watched, her expression serene. Chloe had arranged the surprise entry an hour ago. Isabella stared at the gown, her mind refusing to connect the dots. The technique, the artistry, the sheer genius of it. It felt hauntingly familiar. It was like her stepsister's work, but elevated to a godlike level. Damien leaned down, his voice a low murmur in Elara's ear. A beautiful checkmate. The game is far from over, she murmured back. As the applause thundered through the hall, a thought suddenly struck Isabella, so horrific, so impossible, that she felt the blood drain from her face. Aura, the mysterious genius. Elara, the quiet, unassuming sister she had always dismissed as a mere hobbyist. Could they be? No, it was impossible. But the seed of doubt was planted, and it was beginning to sprout. After the presentation, Genevieve Dubois swept through the crowd, her eyes searching. She ignored the Vances completely, making a beeline for Elara and Damien. Mr. Blackwood, she said, her French accent sharp, that gown. I must know the artist. I must feature them on the cover of Global Vogue. Before Damien could speak, Elara gave a small, enigmatic smile. Aura values her privacy, Ms. Dubois, but she is an admirer of your work. Genevieve's eyes, sharp as a hawk's, zeroed in on Elara. She saw the quiet confidence, the artist's hands, the unmistakable spark of brilliance. She looked from Elara's face to the Event Horizon gown, still on display, and understanding dawned in her eyes. "I see," she said, her lips curving into a smile of her own. She turned to look directly at Isabella, who was watching them with a panicked expression. Genevieve raised her voice just enough to be heard by the surrounding tables. "Well, tonight has been most illuminating. It seems New York has a new queen of couture. And the old one," she added, her gaze cutting into Isabella like a shard of ice, "was never more than a pretender to the throne." The facelap was so public, so brutal, that Isabella physically recoiled. All her stolen glory had turned to ash in her mouth. She had been crowned and dethroned in the same night. As Damien escorted Elara from the gala, he led her not to his car, but to a private elevator. It ascended to the building's rooftop garden, a hidden oasis overlooking the glittering cityscape. "A reward for a battle well fought," he said, gesturing to a small table set with champagne and macarons. "This was just a skirmish." "Not the battle," Elara corrected, though she allowed a small smile. The cool night air felt good. "Then allow me to offer a token for the victor." He reached into his pocket and produced a small velvet box. Inside was not jewelry, but a single ornate antique key. "What is this?" she asked. "It's the key to the old Van Doren textile building in the meatpacking district. It's been derelict for years, but it has the best light in the city and enough space to build a true fashion empire." He paused, his dark eyes serious. "It's yours, a headquarters, a studio, whatever you want it to be." No strings attached, Elara was speechless. It was an extravagant, thoughtful gift. It was a foundation. He wasn't just a partner in her revenge. He was investing in her future. "Why are you doing this, Damien?" she asked softly. He stepped closer, taking her hand. His touch sent a current of warmth through her. "Because, Elara, I told you. I have a keen interest in rare and beautiful things. And I believe the world deserves to see what you can truly create. Free from the shadows, under the starlight, with the city at their feet." Elara felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. It wasn't just the thrill of victory or the satisfaction of revenge. It was hope. The fallout from the fashion-forward gala was immediate and devastating for the Vances. Genevieve Dubois's review was a masterclass in journalistic assassination. She hailed Aura S. Event Horizon as a work of transcendent genius, while dismissing Isabella S. dress as a tragic caricature of true design, a cautionary tale of ambition without talent. Vance Couture's stock plummeted overnight. Orders were cancelled. Their brand, once a beacon of classic elegance, was now a laughingstock. Isabella, consumed by a paranoid rage, was convinced Elara was Aura. "She's taunting me, Daddy. It has to be her." Marcus, however, refused to believe it. "Don't be ridiculous. Elara was a talented sketch artist, yes, but she lacks the vision, the resources to be Aura. Aura is an international icon. Elara is a disgraced nobody who got lucky with Damien Blackwood." Their denial was a fortress, but Elara's attacks were relentless. with her suppliers gone and her reputation in tatters. The only thing keeping Vance Couture afloat was a major contract with Phoenix Group, a luxury hotel chain, to design their new global uniforms. It was their last lifeline. Meanwhile, Richard Sterling was on the verge of bankruptcy. The collapse of the Hudson Yards Pinnacle project was imminent. Desperate, he called Elara. "Meet me," he pleaded, his voice stripped of its usual arrogance. "Please, Elara, we need to talk." They met at a quiet cafe. Richard looked haggard, his perfect hair disheveled. "Elara, I'm sorry," he began, the words sounding foreign in his mouth. "I was a fool. Isabella and your father. They manipulated me." Elara stirred her coffee, her expression unreadable. "And now your deal is collapsing, and you need Damian Blackwood's influence to save it. Is that the apology?" He flinched. "Yes. No, look, I can help you. I have evidence. The original security footage from the party, it was edited. I have the raw file. It shows Isabella meeting with the man in the shadows, not you. It proves she framed you." Elara's heart skipped a beat. She had assumed they destroyed it. "Why are you telling me this now? Give me one word with Blackwood. Get him to reinstate my funding. In return, I'll give you the file. You can clear your name and destroy Isabella for good." It was the perfect transactional repentance. "If it's authentic, I will consider speaking to Mr. Blackwood." He looked panicked, but he was out of options. Fine. An hour later, the file was in her inbox. It was exactly as he'd said. The unedited footage clearly showed Isabella orchestrating the entire setup. It was the silver bullet she needed. Her revenge was falling into place so perfectly that she almost missed the danger. That evening, she was at her new cavernous studio in the meatpacking district, the building Damien had given her. It was still mostly empty, a blank canvas for her future. She was working late, sketching out ideas for her first official collection under her own name. When the lights suddenly went out, her senses went on high alert. She heard the scuff of a shoe in the darkness. She wasn't alone. She grabbed the heaviest thing on her desk, a metal tisquarant, flattened herself against the wall, her heart pounding. Two figures emerged from the shadows, bulky and menacing. Well, look what we have here," one of them rasped. "The little designer all alone." "Richard sends his regards," the other one said with a cruel laugh. "He doesn't like being played for a fool." Of course, Richard was never going to just hand over the evidence. He was going to take her out of the equation entirely. It was a life-or-death crisis. She feigned terror, cowering back. "Please, don't hurt me. Take whatever you want." As the first man lunged for her, she dropped low, swinging the heavy T-square with all her might against his knee. He howled in pain and crumpled to the ground. The second man, stunned by her ferocity, hesitated for a split second. It was all the time she needed. She kicked a rolling stool into his path, sending him stumbling, and sprinted for the emergency exit. He recovered quickly, chasing her down the dark hallway. She burst through the exit door, not into the safety of the street, but onto a rusty old fire escape 5 stories above the cobblestone alley. The rain from the night before had made the metal slick. Her attacker followed, a grim smile on his face. "Nowhere to run, little bird." He lunged, she dodged, her heels slipping on the wet metal. She lost her balance, a scream tearing from her throat as she tipped backward over the railing into the abyss. Suddenly, a powerful arm wrapped around her waist, yanking her back from the edge with breathtaking force. She slammed into a hard chest, the scent of expensive cologne and sheer power enveloping her. It was Damien. He caught the attacker's wrist, twisting it with a sickening crack. The man screamed and fell back. In the distance, the wail of sirens grew closer. Damien's security team swarmed the alley below. The game was over. He held her for a long moment, his grip firm, his body shielding hers. His heart was hammering against her back, the only sign that the unflappable Damien Blackwood had been afraid. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. She could only nod, her body trembling with adrenaline. He helped her back inside, into the light of the hallway, now flooded with his security personnel. His eyes scanned her for injuries, his expression dark with a protective fury she had never seen before. "This was Richard Sterling," she managed to say. Damien's jaw tightened. He just signed his own death warrant. He took her back to his own penthouse. A stunning, minimalist apartment with panoramic views of the entire city. After a doctor confirmed she was unharmed, he wrapped her in a cashmere blanket and handed her a glass of brandy. "I was tracking Richard's movements," he explained, his voice returning to its usual calm, though his eyes were still stormy. "When he hired 2 known thugs, I feared he might do something like this. I came as fast as I could." She looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw past the billionaire titan. She saw the man who had raced across the city, who had pulled her back from the brink of death. "Thank you, Damien," she said softly. "I won't let anyone hurt you, Elara," he said, his voice a solemn vow. "Ever." This was more than an alliance. This was something deeper. As he sat beside her, a silent, powerful guardian, Elara knew that her sweet reward was in tea, just the keys to a building or the thrill of revenge. It was him. The next morning, Chloe arrived at Damien's penthouse with a tablet. "Good morning, Elara. I have news." Elara, feeling safe and rested for the first time in weeks, took the tablet. "Richard Sterling was arrested an hour ago," Chloe said with satisfaction. "Attempted murder isn't good for a real estate mogul's image. And the unedited security footage you received. I've already leaked it to Genevieve Dubois. It will be the headline of Vogue's online edition by noon." Elara smiled. "There's more," she said, her expression serious. "The Vance Phoenix Group uniform contract. The final design approval meeting is tomorrow, but our sources say Phoenix Group's CEO is making a surprise visit to the meeting. He never attends these things. Something's happening." Elara looked at Damien. He knew something. Chloe looked at her boss, then back at Elara. It's a name you know. Elara, the CEO is Damien Blackwood. Elara stared at him, stunned. The final lifeline keeping her family's company afloat was held by the very man helping her dismantle it. The partial reveal she had been planning, that she was Orowa's, suddenly dwarfed by this. Damien wasn't just a partner. He was the judge, jury, and executioner, and he had just handed her the gavel. The final showdown was no longer a matter of if, but when. And it was going to be glorious. The news that Damien was the CEO of Phoenix Group, a fact he'd kept hidden as part of his reclusive, compartmentalized business strategy, changed the entire chessboard. Elara now held all the power. The final meeting for the uniform contract was no longer a lifeline for Vance Couture. It was their executioner's block. The story of Isabella framing Elara, complete with the crystal-clear video footage, had exploded online. Genevieve Dubois had written a scathing titled "The Devil Wears Vance," and the public, which had once condemned Elara, now turned on Isabella with a rabid fury. The Vances were besieged. Their phones rang endlessly with calls from furious journalists and clients. They were trapped in their Park Avenue penthouse, a gilded cage of their own making. She planted it. The footage is fake. Isabella shrieked, pacing frantically. That conniving witch is trying to ruin me. Marcus Vance, for the first time, looked old and defeated. His company was in free fall, his reputation destroyed. No one will believe us, Isabella. The video is damning. And with Richard Sterling arrested for trying to have her killed, we look like monsters. He finally looked at his daughter, truly looked at her, and saw the ugly, grasping ambition that had led them to this point. Was it worth it? He asked, his voice hollow. Their only hope was the Phoenix Group contract. If they could just secure that deal, they could weather the storm. It was worth hundreds of millions and would stabilize the company. The day of the meeting, Isabella and Marcus put on their bravest faces. They walked into the Blackwood conglomerate boardroom, a sleek, intimidating space on the 80th floor overlooking all of Manhattan. The senior Phoenix Group executives were already seated. Isabella laid out her design portfolio, a collection of bland, uninspired sketches, pale imitations of Elara's earlier work. As you can see, she began, her voice trembling slightly, our designs project an image of modern luxury and timeless elegance. She was halfway through her pitch when the boardroom doors opened. Elara walked in. She was not the meek, broken girl they had cast out. She was a vision of power, dressed in a sharp, tailored white suit that was both angelic and predatory. Behind her walked Damien Blackwood. Isabella and Marcus froze, their blood turning to ice. Elara, Marcus sputtered. "What are you doing here? This is a private meeting." "I'm here on behalf of my client," Elara said, her voice echoing in the silent room. She placed a single, elegant portfolio on the table. It was bound in black leather with a single silver letter embossed on the front. Damien took his seat at the head of the table. "Mr. Vance, Miss Vance, thank you for your presentation." We've reviewed it. However, a competing bid was submitted this morning. He nodded towards Elara, from the designer known as Aura. The name landed like a bomb. Marcus stared at Elara, his face ashen with dawning horror. Your Aura. You never did look closely at my sketchbooks, did you, father? Elara said, her voice devoid of emotion. You just saw a daughter to be married off. You never saw the artist who was building an empire in your shadow. She opened her portfolio. The designs inside were breathtaking. They were innovative, practical, and imbued with a chic, effortless style that made Isabella's work look like children's drawings. It wasn't just a uniform, it was a brand identity. One of the Phoenix executives let out a low whistle of appreciation. This is extraordinary. Isabella stared at the designs, the undeniable genius in every line, and something inside her finally snapped. The years of jealousy, of feeling second best, of stealing her sister's light because she had none of her own, all boiled over. She's lying, Isabella screamed, her voice cracking. She stole those from me. They're my ideas. She's the thief. She's always been the thief. It was a desperate, pathetic display. No one in the room believed her. They all looked at her with a mixture of pity and disgust. Damien held up a hand for silence. He looked at Marcus. Mr. Vance Phoenix Group finds itself in a difficult position. We cannot, in good conscience, partner with a brand mired in such scandal. A brand whose lead designer has been publicly exposed for fraud and whose family is implicated in a plot that led to an attempted murder. Each word was a nail in the coffin of Vance Couture. Therefore, Damien continued, his voice ringing with finality. We are officially terminating our negotiations with Vance. Couture Marcus visibly sagged in his chair as if his strings had been cut. It was over. The last lifeline was gone. And, Damien added, a faint, cruel smile on his lips, we are pleased to announce a new, exclusive, 10-year partnership with the design house of Aura for all our global hospitality needs. The revenge was complete. In one move, Elara had not only saved the contract, but had taken it for herself, establishing her new brand on the ashes of her old families. She had stripped them of their legacy, their money, and their last shred of dignity. Isabella let out a choked sob and ran from the room. Marcus didn't move. He just stared at Elara, the daughter he had thrown away. Now an untouchable queen sitting on a throne he could never hope to reach. Why, he whispered, his voice hoarse. After everything, why destroy us? Elara finally met his gaze, and for the first time he saw not a daughter, but a stranger, a powerful woman he didn't know at all. You didn't just disown me, father. You tried to erase me, she said, her voice as cold and clear as a diamond. You stood by and watched as they stole my work, my name, my future. You chose a lie over your own blood. This isn't destruction. This is a reckoning. She closed her portfolio and stood up. Chloe will be in touch regarding the liquidation of Vance Couture's assets, she said, turning to one of the executives. My firm will be acquiring their workshops and retaining any artisans who wish to stay. The rest is irrelevant. With that, she walked out of the boardroom, leaving her father sitting amidst the wreckage of his life. She didn't look back. There was nothing left for her there. The ghosts of her past had been exorcised. Vengeance had been served, cold and complete. With Vance Couture in ruins and Isabella a social pariah who had fled the country, a strange sort of peace settled over Elara's life. Her new company, Aura House, was thriving. The Phoenix Group contract gave her immediate global prestige. The fashion world was desperate to know more about the mysterious genius, and Elara, in her own time, began to step into the light. She was no longer Elara Vance, the disgraced daughter, nor was she Aura, the phantom designer. She was Elara, the architect of her own destiny. Her relationship with Damien had deepened into something solid and real. He was her partner in business and in life. A steadfast presence who celebrated her strength and soothed the lingering scars of her past. They were New York's new power couple, their story a modern fairy tale of ruin and redemption. But one piece of the puzzle remained. Marcus Vance. After the boardroom catastrophe, he had vanished from public life. He desold the family penthouse to cover the company's debts and was living in obscurity. Elara had no desire to see him, but she knew that for true closure, a final confrontation was necessary. The opportunity came in the form of a crimson-edged invitation. It was for the annual Legacy Ball, the most exclusive event on the New York social calendar, a night where old money and new power collided. This year, the ball was celebrating innovators who were shaping the future of the city. The guest of honor and keynote speaker was Elara. She knew Marcus would be there. The ball was hosted by a board on which he had sat for 30 years. It was the last bastion of his old world, the one place he might still feel he belonged. "Are you ready for this?" Damien asked her the night of the ball as he helped her fasten a necklace of breathtaking blackwood diamonds. She looked at her reflection in the mirror. She was wearing an Aura original, a gown of deep emerald green silk that shimmered like a living thing. She looked regal, confident, and untouchable. "I'm not the one who should be afraid of tonight," she said, her voice calm. They arrived at the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel to a flurry of camera flashes. The cream of society was there, and they all parted to watch Elara's entrance. The whispers that followed her were now of awe and admiration. She was the queen of her own making. She saw him across the room. Marcus Vance stood alone, looking like a ghost at the feast. He was thinner, grayer, wearing an ill-fitting tuxedo that had probably once been a symbol of his status, but now just hung on his diminished frame. He watched her with a complex expression of shame, regret, and a flicker of something she couldn't name. Pride. Throughout the dinner, she could feel his eyes on her. When the time came for her keynote speech, she walked to the podium with a steady grace. The room fell silent. "Good evening," she began, her voice clear and strong. "We are here tonight to celebrate legacy. But legacy is a curious thing. It can be a foundation to build upon, or it can be a cage that holds you captive. Some legacies are inherited, others are forged in fire." She didn't look at Marcus, but everyone knew who she was talking about. "I once believed my legacy was to be a dutiful daughter, to live in the shadow of a name that was not truly my own. I was taught that my own light was too bright, that my own voice was too loud. I was told to shrink, to be less, so that others could feel bigger." She paused, her gaze sweeping the room. "That life ended in a cold alley, stripped of my name, my work, and my family, and in that moment of absolute ruin, I discovered a truth. When you have nothing left to lose, you are finally free. Free to build your own legacy. Not from marble and gold passed down through generations, but from the ashes of who you used to be." Her words were powerful, her story captivating. She spoke of creativity, of resilience, of the importance of owning your own narrative. "So, my message tonight is this," she concluded, her eyes finally, deliberately, finding her father's. "Do not let anyone else define your worth. Your name is not who you are. Your past is not who you are. You are the architect of your own soul. Build something magnificent." The room erupted in a standing ovation. It was a moment of absolute triumph. She had taken their scandal and turned it into her strength. She had rewritten her story, and the world was applauding her for it. As the applause died down, she stepped away from the podium. Marcus was walking towards her, his steps slow and hesitant. The crowd, sensing a final dramatic confrontation, gave them a wide berth. He stopped in front of her, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Elara," he began, his voice raspy. "Your speech, it was honest," she supplied, her tone neutral. "You are brilliant," he said, the words sounding like a painful confession. "More brilliant than I ever allowed myself to see. I was a fool, blinded by tradition and by a weak man's pride. I listened to the wrong daughter. It was the closest he would ever come to an apology. Isabella was just a reflection of your own values," Father Elara said, not unkindly. "You valued ambition over integrity, surface over substance. You didn't choose the wrong daughter. You chose yourself." The truth of her words hit him with the force of a physical blow. He had nothing left to say. There were no excuses. "I am so sorry, Elara," he finally whispered, the words raw and broken. But Elara looked at the man before her. Not the titan of industry she had once feared and revered, but a small, sad old man consumed by his regrets. She felt no anger, no hatred, only a quiet final release. "I know," she said, and in those two words there was a universe of forgiveness, not for him, but for herself. She was letting go. From across the room, Damien watched, ready to intervene at a moment's notice. But he didn't need to. Elara was in complete control, Marcus nodded, accepting her verdict. He turned and walked away, not looking back, a man fading into the history he had so desperately tried to control. The final ghost was laid to rest. Elara felt a profound sense of peace. The war was over. She had won. She had reclaimed her name, her honor, and her future. Damien came to her side, slipping his hand into hers. "It's finished," he said softly. "No," she said, turning to him with a radiant smile that lit up her entire face. "It's just beginning." 3 months later, the main atrium of the newly opened Aura House headquarters was buzzing with energy. The building Damien had given her was no longer a derelict shell, but a gleaming temple of Fashunas, or 7-story, masterpiece of glass, steel, and light. Tonight was its grand opening, and also the official launch of Elara's first eponymous collection. It was the culmination of her journey, a celebration of her rebirth. The event was the most sought-after ticket in the city. Fashion critics, celebrities, investors, and the entire high society ecosystem that had once shunned her were now crammed into her space, desperate to witness her coronation. Elara stood on a balcony overlooking the crowd, Damien by her side. She wore a gown of pure white, a deliberate choice. It wasn't the white of weddings or innocence, but the white of a blank page, of a new beginning. "Nervous?" Damien asked, squeezing her hand. "Excited," she replied, her eyes sparkling. "This isn't just about the clothes, it's a statement that art and integrity can win." Down below, the lights dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd. The show was beginning. What followed was not a typical runway show. It was a piece of performance art. Models moved through installations, each telling a part of Elara's story. The first section featured designs in muted greys and blush pinks. With restrictive tailoring and hidden details nod to her constrained life as Elara Vance. The next section exploded with dark, powerful pieces, velvets, and leathers in blacks and deep blues, reflecting the rise of Aura, her shadowy Avenger persona. The final section was a riot of color and light, bold, free-flowing silhouettes in emerald, crimson, and gold. The clothes were joyful, confident, and unapologetically brilliant. It was the work of a woman who was finally, completely herself. The finale was a single model who walked the entire length of the atrium. She wore the Event Horizon gown, the masterpiece from the gala. As she reached the center of the room, she stopped Elara from the balcony, nodded. The show was over. The room was silent for a beat, processing the sheer artistry they had witnessed. Then the applause started. It wasn't just clapping. It was a roar, a thunderous, sustained ovation that shook the very glass walls of the building. Genevieve Dubois was on her feet, tears in her eyes, leading the applause. Elara, with Damien's hand firmly in hers, descended the grand staircase to greet her guests. She was mobbed, surrounded by people offering congratulations, their faces alight with genuine admiration. Onlookers who had once scorned her now tripped over themselves to praise her. Their regret was a silent, satisfying symphony. Later in the evening, as the party was in full swing, Damien led her to a quiet corner of the rooftop garden, the same place he had first given her the key to her future. "I have something for you," he said, his voice serious. He didn't pull out a ring box. Instead, he handed her a leather-bound portfolio. Confused, she opened it. Inside were the architectural plans and deeds for a series of buildings in Paris, Milan, and London. He had acquired prime real estate in the world's major fashion capitals. "An empire needs outposts," he said simply. But that wasn't all. Beneath the deeds was another document. It was a charitable foundation established in her name, the Elara Foundation for Young Designers. It was endowed with $100 million. Its mission was to provide funding and mentorship to talented unknown artists, so they would never have to suffer the way she had. Tears welled in her eyes. It was the most thoughtful, meaningful gift anyone had ever given her. It wasn't just about wealth or power. It was about creating a better legacy. "Damien," she whispered, speechless. "You said you wanted to build something magnificent," he said, his dark eyes soft. "I'm just providing the tools. The vision has always been yours." She threw her arms around his neck, kissing him with all the love and gratitude in her heart. This was her happy ending. It wasn't about a prince saving a damsel in distress. It was about a queen who had saved herself, and in doing so, had found a king who recognized her strength as the most beautiful thing about her. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, overlooking the city that was now hers to command, Elara thought about the girl in the ruined pink dress, shivering in an alley. She had lost everything, only to find that everything she ever needed, her talent, her courage, her indomitable will, had been inside her all along. The Vances, the Sterlings, they had tried to write her ending, but they had forgotten one crucial detail. She was the author of her own story, and it was destined to be a masterpiece.